So I just wanted to start by saying my mum's here tonight, which is the first time in my entire science career that I think my mum has come. And when we left home today, yeah, she's up the back. She's probably very embarrassed. I hope this doesn't come out of my 6-minute time lot. But she said to me, I hope I don't embarrass you tonight. Where can I sit to not embarrass you? But she didn't know that I've got the microphone, so I can embarrass her. So I'm going to talk about the brain and how it changes and how it can change and why that's important for stroke recovery. We don't squeeze it like that, but it's just a cool image. Feel free to email me questions, or I'm on the Twitter as well, so you can tweet me and stuff. But feel free to certainly email me questions or catch up with me in the break. So have you heard the one about the London cab drivers? Has anyone heard the story about that? So London cab drivers, they took their brains, not quite, they put them in MRI scanners and they had a look at their brain. So London's very busy, lots of streets. I remember jumping in the cab from Heathrow and driving to somewhere in London. It cost me £100. But the cab driver knew how to get there from Heathrow, which is a long way away. And actually what they discovered in the MRI scanner is that their hippocampus was quite large, larger than normal. And in fact, it's actually the anterior hippocampus, which is where spatial maps and spatial memory is stored. So that makes sense, doesn't it? So maybe people who remember maps and where to drive, of course they're going to have good spatial memory. And the science behind it looked pretty good. So the longer someone had driven a cab, the bigger that hippocampus was. So for example, that kind of says to us the more training you do, so on-the-job training in terms of your driving in London, the bigger your hippocampus got. But maybe it's other things. Maybe that's what attracted people to driving cabs, or maybe there's something about the stress of driving in London that caused those changes. So why not have a look at bus drivers? So bus drivers, if my clicker works, I'm not sure, there should be a bus popping up, if my spatial memory serves me right. Is it clicking forward? No? Yep, there's the bus. Hey, I didn't do it, but there it is. So they looked at bus drivers and they said if they're driving around, same stressful situation, same streets, but their hippocampus wasn't enlarged. But if you think of a bus, you get on a bus, the bus driver probably drives a very similar route all the time. So you don't need to be able to remember where to go. But when I jump in a cab in wherever I am, the cab driver's got no idea where he's going to go until I say, I want you to go to this address. So the poor cab driver has to remember different routes and how to get there. So a really good example of how the brain can change in response to training. And that's years of training to change brain structure and function. I think I'm either out of batteries or maybe I'll give you the changeover. Yep. So what does that mean for someone who's had a stroke? So for example, we see an MRI scan up there. So that's one of my patients that comes into studies, and I'm not too sure who it is, but they might even come to our clinic as well. And you can see it's basically like we've cut their head at the top. Okay, so you're looking down on top of the head, there's a left and a right hemisphere, but on the left hemisphere there's quite a lot of damage, that sort of white stuff, and there's a bit of black stuff in the middle. So that's the stroke. So that person can't really use their right arm or their right side of the body very well. So what does all this brain change stuff mean, and how can we use that? So the thing that we often do is look at mouse models. Not me personally, we look at what other people have done. So if we go to the next one, yep. And what often happens is they pop them into like an enriched environment. So a mouse has a stroke, they induce the stroke in a mouse, give them a chance to learn a lot of stuff, so practice. Remember we talked about cab drivers practicing a lot driving around in the streets. Same with the mice, give them the opportunity just to practice using that paw to regain movement. And what they found was that very early after stroke, within about 1 to 2 weeks, the mouse can recover a lot of movement in that paw. Okay, so stroke recovery happens very early. So what is it that's causing stroke recovery to happen so early? I think my thing's out of, so I might have to give you the click, yep. And what they found was that it was actually changes in genes and proteins within the brain that actually resulted in the brain's capacity to change actually improving. So what they say is there's a spontaneous increase in the capacity of the brain to change after stroke. And it seems that early after stroke, a mouse certainly has this, because we know that much of the recovery happens within the first week or two, and those genes and proteins seem to change around 5 to 14 days. So you've got this little window where much of the stroke recovery happens. It'd be really good if that happened in humans, don't you think? So someone has a stroke. Does anyone here know someone who's had a stroke before? It's about 1 in 4 people over the age of 25 will have a stroke in their lifetime. So you imagine those people that you know, if they could actually recover quite a lot of their function, that'd be great. Go to the next one. So we tested that. So we actually only published that early last year. And there's about 4 years of data in that one figure on the bottom left, which is not a lot to show. But it's a lot of really important information. And what you see going up the y-axis is a measure of neuroplasticity, and across the x-axis along the bottom is time. So with these people that we tracked for 12 months after stroke, we found that they had an increased capacity for neuroplasticity, so brain changes, early after stroke. So we see that same window where the brain's able to change. So that tells me as a physio that therapy is really critical then. So if we go back to our cab driver, years of training, lots of experience drives brain changes. Here, a stroke patient, he's got capacity to change, much more capacity to learn and recover. So therapy is important. Okay. The other interesting thing though, because I actually work more on chronic stroke, so people that are years after injury. So what happens 12 months after a stroke and beyond? Recovery is possible, but it's often a lot slower than early on. So what could we do? So one thing that we're really interested in is whether we can reopen this window of enhanced neuroplasticity. So if we go to the next one. So one thing we do is look at mice and just see what they've tested and done in mice. So here's a mouse. They've given a mouse a stroke. Not very nice, I know. I saw someone cringe at that before. So there's a mouse brain over on the right, and that's sort of the paw area of the mouse brain, okay, where the stroke happens. But instead of using that window of plasticity, where the brain can change really quickly if you train it with some stuff, they didn't do anything for these mice. They just left them, and they got, they put me off with that beeping. Oh, let's try. Nope, sorry, not working still. And then they gave the mouse a second stroke in a different area of the brain. So this poor mouse has had one stroke, no training with its paw. The chance for recovery is minimal now because it's outside that window, and they give you a second stroke. And then if you go to the next one, they pop the mice now into an enriched environment, get them to train lots, and the way to do that is with food. So give the mouse something to eat. He's trying to grab his food, and because that window is open, he can actually what happened was that the second stroke actually reopened that window for enhanced training. So we can't really, unfortunately, give a mouse a second stroke. Am I too far from the computer? I'll point it, maybe. So we can't give humans a second stroke, can we? It's not very nice. We probably wouldn't do that. But it tells us that we can reopen that window of enhanced plasticity. Hey, maybe point it. So things we've tried, though, that are a bit more humane, if you want to call it that, is stimulating the brain. So we use electric currents, direct current to the brain. This was 14 sessions done at home, 20 minutes of stimulation, an hour of training. Some people got sham. Okay, so which is no stimulation. They just did the training with their arm. And you can see we've got a measure of arm function. So we've got a baseline measure and then after the treatment. And then also we did some follow-up measures. Nothing really changed if you did sham. But does the brain stimulation reopen a period where the brain can learn? Well, that's what happened when they got active. Okay, significant gains in their upper limb function. And actually it continued on even after the stimulation had finished, all the training had finished. 1 and 3 months afterwards. They're not doing any therapy, but they kept getting better beyond that. So stimulation's not for everyone, because there are some side effects. So what else could we do? So these are some of the other things we've looked at. We used a virtual reality motor imagery task. So you're sort of engaged, very immersive task, but you don't move your hands. You see these everything's around you and it looks like it's your hands, you feel like your hands, you're actually trying to engage. And that we know that fires off brain activity. Okay? That one seemed to work. That seemed to increase brain plasticity without even moving your hands. Perfect for stroke. We also tried exercise. So an honours project, a student was riding a bike. We got 30 stroke patients in riding a bike with their legs. And it increased brain plasticity. You can see in the red, the exercise group there. Increased brain plasticity just from riding a bike. Moderate intensity, not hard, 20 minutes. Do that before therapy. Better outcomes when you train with your physio. Thanks very much. Sorry the clicker was causing troubles, but that's it. Thank you.